I don't normally review a lot of animation, but I was given the opportunity to screen The Imaginary. It's coming to Netflix soon, but it's also hitting some festivals. Now, it looks a lot like a Studio Ghibli production, but are you going to want to add this to your watch list once it releases? Rudger is a boy no one can see, imagined by Amanda to share her thrilling make-believe adventures. When Rudger arrives alone at the Town of Imaginaries, where forgotten imaginaries live and find work, he faces a mysterious threat. Now, part of the reason this looks like a Studio Ghibli film is that The Imaginary was directed by Yoshiyuki Momose, who animated Spirited Away and then a couple of the other Ghibli films. Now, right off the bat, I think this movie is going to freak out and scare little kids. So even though they may be drawn to the beautiful animation, the story itself is dark and sometimes frightening. We follow Amanda and her imaginary friend Rudger, and we learn how Rudger came to be and why Amanda relies on him so much. Now, even this aspect of the story, it is steeped in sadness and melancholy, but there's also a sweetness that's intertwined. Amanda and Rudger encounter the villain of the story, and he is ruthless, driven, mostly a madman. During an altercation with the villain, this is when Rudger gets separated from Amanda, and he learns of this huge imaginary realm where others like him go until they can either be reunited with their child or they find new children to be with. All right, so the animation of this, it is wonderful to watch. It's hand-drawn and features many rounded edges. There aren't very many sharp areas of characters. I mean, even the villain's features retain this soft curve to them. And this helps to temper down the scariness and the fear, even though it doesn't remove any of the underlying dread. Now, I loved the use of colors in this. Again, mainly using softer colors instead of employing harsh or extremely vibrant ones. I mean, we still have a wide gamut of hues. They're just a bit subdued to make scenes visually more uplifting. I also appreciate the depth of the animation, where items in the background, they're not completely static, but they have movement so that the world feels just more alive and tangible. Not everything in the background is detailed out or meticulously designed, but there is enough there so we can feel that this isn't just a two-dimensional space, with whatever's going on in the foreground the only thing that really has motion or design. Now, I normally watch films and series in their original language, but I chose to watch the dub version of this. The voice cast is excellent. We get characterizations from Haley Atwell, Cal Penn, and LeVar Burton, along with some younger actors, Louis Rudge Buchanan and Evie Kissel. Now, I became sucked into the emotional performances, most of them showcasing this massive range of emotional depth, just through their intonations. Now, Cal Penn plays his character a little more stoic and monotone, but that's also what is needed for his guide-type role. So while it wasn't as dynamic as many of the others were, it did fit with his character's personality. Now, for teens and adults who might watch this, there are a lot of themes that can just hit you in the gut rather unexpectedly. The film confronts loss, grief, death, and moving on, and each of them is palpable but relatable. Because these are many of the underlying ideas, exploring them can take some time. So the pacing, it is a little slower in areas, which I think could make you slightly feel the hour 45 runtime. Now, I didn't get bored at all with it, but I certainly could see how littles, they would get squirmy pretty easily. And that's not to say that there isn't some wonderful action or excitement. As well as just fun within the storytelling. There is quite a bit of energy, even urgency, that creates some scenarios that can have you scooting up in your seat in anticipation. And especially as we reach the finale. I was actually holding my breath a bit, which did surprise me. I didn't expect to become so invested, but I was truly anxious about what could transpire at the end. Mostly because the story had already demonstrated that it wasn't afraid to make some shocking choices with its characters earlier on in the film. Now, the musical score in this, I thought it was beautiful. At times, though, I did find it to be a little overwhelming, or maybe it was just overtaking some of the sequences. Instead of complementing the animation and the action, it came across that it was more competing for prominence. Just reducing the mix, I think, would have made this stand out so much less. Whereas how it is, the scenes weren't sure what they wanted me to focus on. Now, thankfully, the music is sweeping and emotional, and it's not grating or just ill-matched. I just would have preferred the overall volume to be a little bit more subtle. For a film called The Imaginary, I wasn't sure what types of characters or creatures that we'd be shown. And most of these, they're very grounded and not absurd or strange. Not that it would have been any kind of issue for me. One of my all-time favorite cartoons is Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and those creations can be very bizarre. For this movie, though, most of them are normal. There are a couple of these that are like samurai or sumo egg-type friends, even some talking animals like a pink hippo with a flower tail. When the ideas step outside of the ordinary, they are imaginative and friendly looking. So overall, The Imaginary is beautifully animated and features a spectacular voice cast. The color palette is striking, but also inviting through the use of subdued but varied hues. While the musical score is emotional and sweeping, the mix creates conflicting priorities, causing more emotional confusion than intended. And even though this is an animated feature filled with children's imaginary friends, the themes explored are mature and deep, so younger audiences may not appreciate the core ideas, even though they will be wowed by the visuals. Even the villain arc is grim, putting adult ideas of greed and destruction into a narrative that's visually aimed at children. If you're a fan of Ghibli movies, this Studio Ponok film can make you feel right at home, complete with tense scenes and tear-jerking moments. There's no sex or nudity or profanity, but there are some frightening and distressing sequences of harm and violence. I give The Imaginary 4 out of 5 couches. So are you a fan of these types of animated films? What's a favorite of yours? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.